Hello, everyone, and welcome to the EFL Fantasy Podcast. My name is Angus,
And my name is Dan.
and we're back after a little bit of a gap. We're going to review the Game Week 10 action. It's a quick turnaround. Game Week 11 is in midweek, so sort of getting back, recording and firing something out. I guess I'll do the sort of as a reminder of what we do here. We'll pick out some of the games that we want to talk about, whether it's or both of the teams. Um, sort of uh, go through the other games, go through your questions, normal format, and get this out for you. We're recording Sunday night, ahead of the game week 11 deadline on Tuesday night. But first things first, Dan, how are you?
A lot better than it was a couple of weeks ago. I can't remember the last time we done a pod. Did we do one after you got back from America? Can't
Uh,
remember.
Maybe. I honestly don't
I don't know.
remember.
It's been a while anyway, but
Yeah,
I know I'm glad we did that. We didn't pod after the Sheffield United game. It's a lot better after a derby win. But yeah, went through the international break. It was quite a nice break. And then you come straight back into a three-game week, typical championship week, which is good.
yeah, absolutely. Like straight back in, all action, all change, just what we want. But yeah, so as I said, we'll sort of go through how we did as well. I missed that out and the team news and that sort of thing. So yeah, so let's just dive into how we did this game week. I'm going to go first because some people have seen on Twitter. I'm very keen to talk about how I did this week, in part because I finally had quite a good game week. So I ended up with 82 points. And I'll start off with the main news. My one transfer this week was selling Scott Twine to buy Rubin Colwill. Came in and got me 20 points. Um, couldn't have got much better than that. I'll talk a little bit about Cardiff later on, so I won't go too far into it. But yeah, we've talked about him for a long time, and it feels like this is the first sort of time actually he's got a proper sustained 5 or 6 games in the lineup, playing as the 10 in that team, and they seem to have improved since the interim manager came in. I sort of looked at the fixtures and I was like, I really want a Cardiff player. Um,
No one's ever said that before.
no, not for a while anyway. Like,
No, not for a
yeah,
while.
and Col-Will, the last sort of 2 or 3 games, he was really sort of showing up with some of the data, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll take a punt on him. And it couldn't have paid off much better. Um, we'll talk about it a bit later on, but with a helping hand or pair of hands from Ibrahim Sissoko in the first half of that game. I had Palmer in goal for 4. Hegem also auto subbed off the bench for Perez for 4. So the late Dane Scarlett goal, a real killer for me. Um, Firpo 5, Doughty 12. Uh, Obviously, I mentioned Col-Will 20 in midfield, Hamer 3, Brownhill 11, Mundell 5, Madger vice captain for 3, Sergeant captain for 14, and Hadji Wright for 1. Um, so obviously my rank has been taking a bit of a battering. I'm up into the 500s now. But particularly still with away days to play, I feel sort of like in a better place. And you're always happy when you have something like that, a move that comes off that well. It sort of makes everything feel better. So yeah, pretty happy with where I'm at this point. As I say, 82 in total and a big green arrow. So yeah, all positive for me. How did you do this week, Dan?
Yeah, so I got 60. Trying to think of my transfers. I just done Sergeant in for Foster, so he was out, so I captained him as well for 14. I had Nardi in goal for 1, Furlong for 4, Doughty for 12. I had Burrows subbing for Perez for 3, Bellows 3, Dembele 10, Signs 2, Aimer 3, Mundell 5, and vice captain Josh Madger. It was a small red arrow of about 20 places, I think, to 354. Um, I only have one Boost left, and I think yeah, I'm either going to play Park the Bus or Jeepers Keepers. So yeah, it's been frustrating. I obviously had away days. It went okay-ish, nothing spectacular, and then sort of just drifted down. Um, Captain Hamer against Luton, and he was benched. Things like that. So having three West Brom when their form's dropped off a bit hasn't helped. Um, but yeah, I think moving forward, I'm gonna get some Leeds players in. I think. But yeah, overall small red, but I think I know what I'm doing moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. In terms of working out at this period, particularly those who have boosts remaining, how those slot in. We're getting to the point now where it's sort of like, it's you haven't got much time to use them. It's use it or lose it. But it also shows, ranks are still very, very fluid and can sort of swing quite significantly. But yeah, so that's how we did this week. Next thing is the team news. So handing back over to you.
Yeah, so as normal, the main fantasy relevant team news. For Leeds, Piero started over Joseph. Sheffield United changed formation to 3-5-2. O'Hare was sort of supporting more. They benched Ratsaki. Cardiff, Alnwick's been in goal since the new manager's been in. They've dropped Horvath. They've been playing a front four of Tanner, Col-Will, El Ghazi, and Robinson. Um, Luton were back to the 3-5-2, very similar to um, the season we got promoted. Um, played a bit more direct. Moses played right wing back. Chong and Morris were back in the lineup. Watford, Matt Backman was in goal. Oxford, Dembele started instead of Edwards. For West Brom, Dean Garner played as a 10. Um, Coventry moved to a back three. Bassett and Sims up front. White was on the bench. Blackburn Beck, after his red card, was straight back in the lineup, which I found interesting. Campwell started. Gay was up front for Borough. Front four: Doak, Azaz, Hamilton, and Latte Laugh. Bristol City, Wells was up front. Haraka was right wing. QPR 3-4-2-1. Chair started in the 10 alongside Dembele was also a 10. Portsmouth, Lang started. Stoke, Manuf was back in the lineup. Norwich, Fisher started again at right back. For Burnley, Pires bench, Fleming striker as no Foster. That's your team news.
Yeah, some interesting things in there, and I think some of which we knew about, some of which was a little bit of a surprise, particularly as with having Beck and holding him through his suspension. It was quite nice for me to see him sort of straight back in the lineup. I don't necessarily need him a great deal coming up, but it's nice just to have, you know, to have another playing player sort
Yeah.
of on the bench. So that one in particular was nice for me. Um, so yeah, so we're going to jump into talking about some of the games. Um, think I'm going to take the lead with probably the one that will surprise people the most, that we're going to talk about it, but also that sort of then we can get to the fun ones that we really want to talk about. So the first one that I want to talk about, well, it's the second one I wanted to talk about. I'm going to go first. Is Millwall against Derby. So Millwall Derby played out a 1-1 draw this weekend, um, which you probably hear that and think, yeah, that sounds about right. Goals for Jerry Yates and Mihailo Ivanovic. Um, so Millwall sort of picking things up a little bit. They're at 10 points from 10 games. Derby 13 points from 10 games and sitting in mid-table. Um, we haven't talked a lot about them recently, so I wanted to talk about these, particularly since the international break, just the start of September. just to get a feel for how they've been doing, how we sort of read them. I think for a lot of the time we've been looking at sort of probably sort of looking to have players against these teams. And so just sort of a little bit of a check in on how they're doing. So Millwall, since that international break, both of these teams have played 6 games since then. Um, they've only won 1 game. They've drawn 3 and lost 2, which feels quite Millwall. Um, but they haven't conceded an XG over 1 in any of those 6 games, which is the sort of thing that we really associate with Millwall. I think that's the sort of thing where you hear that and it's like, oh yeah, that sounds about right. Which also, given that I'm looking at playing away days with a team that's going to be facing Millwall, uh, is suddenly sort of a little bit panic stations. Um, they had an XG of over 1 in 4 out of those 6 games as well. Which I know there's been a whole thing about sort of, I think it's the XG difference where Millwall should be like a playoff team, which
Yeah,
is always sort of entertaining. The other thing I think to note with them is there's a lot of shots in their games over that period. They had over 10 shots in 5 out of the 6 games, but also conceded over 10 shots in 4 out of the 6 games, which is also interesting in terms of when you factor in the low XG conceded, but there's a bit of volume there. Speaks to potentially the sort of chances they're conceding and not conceding. Um, I think the main thing to note with them is it feels a little bit like, tougher Millwall is back. Like, they're not sort of conceding a massive amount of goals. I mean, in those 5 games, they in those 6 games, sorry, they've conceded 5 goals in total. Um, Part of the problem for them is they've also only scored 5 goals, and 3 of those came in 1 game. Um, so that's the sort of thing that they need to address. But I think that it's signs are positive for them, and I think particularly it factors in for us in terms of whether we look to target them. Um, in a similar vein with Derby, they played 6 games. They have 2 wins, a draw, and 3 defeats. Although it's worth bearing in mind that was a run of 3 defeats to Sheffield United, Norwich, and Sunderland. Um, they've scored in 4 out of 6 games. So their problems are slightly different to Millwall's. And they have 2 clean sheets in there, and they only conceded more than 1 goal in 2 out of those 6 games. So they're another one where there's not necessarily a huge amount of goals in their games, but it's meaning that their results aren't necessarily sort of like the best. Um, the games where they conceded more than 1 goal were to Norwich and Sunderland. Um, in that period, they had a 1-0 win over Cardiff, a 1-0 defeat to Sheffield United, a 2-0 win against QPR, and then this 1-1 draw. Um, so I think it's interesting. Like I say, I think the fact that only Sheffield United and Sunderland in the last 6 have kept a clean sheet against them, so speaks to something on their side, and potentially they are nicking goals in these games. Um, and I think they've only been held scoreless. I think it's just those 2 times this season. Um, so yes, that sort of speaks to them. But yeah, that was just a little bit on these 2 teams off the back of this game in what was a relatively sort of not necessarily the most interesting game, but provided an opportunity to check in on these two. But Dan, what are your thoughts on these 2 teams?
so obviously, Luton did play them um, a few games ago, and we did beat them 1-0 at their place. It was just a typical away day at Mill, really. And as you said about the chances they're conceding, that was the game where Ted and Mengi scored from outside the box. Um, we did have sort of a few half chances. I know Chong hit the post and a few things like that. But yeah, it felt like old Millwall bad. They put the ball in your box every time, and they didn't create too much apart from they did have one massive um, chance when Macaulay Landstaff went. clean through and could have scored.
Mm.
So um, yeah, I know it's pretty common knowledge that they've created the third most XG this year. Um, I think a lot of that is they just get the balls in your box. So obviously when they whether they have a header or a shot, they're normally in and around your box. But yeah, would you go with anyone, Angus? Like you've got Watmore. I know you're not a particularly fan of him, but he has scored and quite a lot of goals and assists this season.
So I did consider him at one point a couple of weeks ago, which shows possibly how dark my season was getting. But when someone is doing that, it's sort of you do at least have to think about it. Um, Particularly with that, I think it does put at the right point Millwall defensive assets back on the table, and potentially the same with Derby. Um, but it's one of those things we've always talked about Millwall sort of defenders before. I think the problem with them is I think they play. I think it's in the next six. They play. I think it's Burnley, Leeds, and Sunderland. Um, so it depends whether you sort of want to. They also play the likes of Plymouth and Swansea in that run, though. So maybe it's sort of like you just want to have them for certain games and not for others. But I think a Millwall defender is certainly a consideration.
They're not as expensive. Like they're not like
Yeah,
premium. They are like 5 million now. You can get Brian for 5 million, Tenganga for 5 million, Cooper's 5-1. Like it's not. You can bench that now. It's not like when they used to be 6, 5.5. It's quite
yeah.
reasonable to get them and bench them. I think.
Yeah, and obviously we went with Jensen at the start of the season. I think he is back on the table now. Someone like me who's potentially looking ahead to a Jeepers keepers. I'm not necessarily saying he's the best option in terms of needing two keepers. I think that, but I think uh, you know, Zetterstrom on the other side might be the one that talking about sort of defensive options from both sides, but I think he might be the one, from these two teams that actually, when it comes down to it, might be the sort of likely one for me to bring in. But I think yeah, I think Zetterstrom is sort of around sixth in the league for saves per game. So particularly one to bear in mind for those with Jeep's keepers, they're not conceding a lot, but he still makes a few saves per game. Um,
They
just to
do
sort of
have a pretty good run, Derby.
yeah,
Um, Unfortunately, three of their next four is away when they've been pretty good at home, but they do have Oxford, Hull, Stoke, Coventry, Plymouth, Preston, Swansea, Wednesday. Well, they must be all bottom half teams near enough.
yeah. I think there's a couple there where you identify, particularly like I say with Jeep's keepers, a couple of there that might have a few shots, but it's also like there might be some clean sheets in there.
Yeah,
And so I think, yeah, like you say, I think there's that both these teams, I think you're primarily looking at defensively at this point, and I think that there's enough there to suggest that they are worth looking at from that front as well.
yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, so sort of got the one that I think is is somewhat interesting, but probably the least sort of fun to talk about out of the way first. So we've picked two games each. Which game do you want to talk about first, Dan?
I'm going to do the Friday night game, Leeds and Sheffield United. I don't know about you, I was quite excited
Yeah.
um, about this game. I believe it was the best two teams in the league going into it. So I was a bit disappointed to see that Sheffield United changed their formation. Um, Having seen Raksaki a couple of weeks before tear us to shreds, I was disappointed he was the one that was dropped. They brought in Reece Norrit and Davis to play as a third centre back. Um, they started the game okay, but then Leeds got on top, um, created a number of chances in the first half. Harrison had, I think, a couple of chances, um, but they sort of were holding on Sheffield United, but never really posed that much of a threat the other way. Um, Eventually, Leeds did get the goals. The first was from Stoik, from a Joe Rothwell assist. It was from a corner, and then um, Joseph wrapped it up, played through and shot past Cooper. Assist from Piero. Um, yeah, it's. I haven't seen Leeds too much. I've seen them. I saw them quite a lot early on in the season where they dropped a few points. But what is interesting is they've played a lot, a few of the sides where you think will be up there. Leeds, like they've already played West Brom, Burnley, Norwich, Sunderland, Sheffield United, and they've picked up a good number of points. Picked 19 points from 10 games, so they're near enough 2 points a game, and they're only 3 points of Sunderland. Um, they've only conceded seven in the league. I think they. I'm pretty sure for XG they're second. Um, Created 17 XG over the season, scored 17 goals. They're not even like underperforming there or overperformed. They've hit it bang on. Um, and XG conceded. Um, they're the lowest. They're 7.2, and they've conceded 7 goals. And you think I can remember a couple of howlers as well from Meslier. The first game against Portsmouth gets beaten at the near post, and we don't really need to talk about the Sunderland one a few weeks ago. Um, so yeah, it's I've not had Leeds for a while. Obviously, I planned for the away days. They had a few tough fixtures, but they're now bang on radar. Um, I think there's loads of options. You got Piero, uh, not Piero. Well, he is an option. Firpo and Bogle, the wing backs. Um, we've obviously got the wingers. It looks like Nonto. I think. Would you say Nonto and Ramazani are the two starters, Angus?
I think so at this point. Obviously, James and Solomon are back fit, but I think at
Yeah,
the way they've played, it would be sort of very harsh to drop them at this point.
yeah. Harrison's. I'm not, I don't know.
I think he's under threat.
You think he's you do
I think they could do something where like they bring
Nonto in the middle?
Solomon in, play him as a 10, bring bring sort of say Dan James in and move someone maybe move Nonto in field or something like that. I think Aronson is potentially under threat at this point.
Okay, yeah, but there's options, and then obviously you always wonder in a 3 game week whether Piero in the Joseph situation we will see the lineups though this game week, so you can sort of see who they pick. So they're good defensively, they're good going forwards. I don't have any. That seems like a massive mistake at this point. Um, Angus, do you have any?
Yeah, I have Firpo. I've been very
Uh,
happy owning him.
yeah,
Um, Particularly because it's been a little bit of the best of both there. He's got some points, whether it's returns or bonus going forward. He's benefited from the solid defense, so I think but I will be looking to add more and quickly um,
yeah,
from them. Yeah, I've been so impressed. I've sort of been watching them this season. I've watched quite a few of their games, and I have thought they've been the best team this season. Like I know
um,
Sheffield United had a more impressive defensive record, and I think Southampton did as well. But I've thought that Leeds have looked as good as anyone defensively. Attacking wise, I think they've been good. They've struggled at times with chance conversion. Joseph was, you know, a little bit of a little bit wasteful. Aronson's been wasteful. I think that they've sort of not taken full advantage of their chances at times. But as you say, they've had this great start despite not having the best fixture run, and I do think it's just sort of indicative. They feel to me sort of better than probably anyone else in the league. All due respect to the likes of Sunderland and Burnley, and Sheffield United and West Brom, who I think have started really well. I do look at Leeds and think, yeah, that is the best team in the league.
Yeah, I agree. They obviously went through like a lot of teams with the mayhem of the transfer window being open. But even then, they were still picking up points. Went away to West Brom. Um, yeah, I'll be amazed if they. I'll be surprised if they don't go up automatically. It's going to
And
have
they
to be
lost
a
their starting midfield, and
yeah,
uh, Tanaka, who was obviously one of the players they brought in the summer, and Rothwell, who they brought in on loan. Tanaka was the man of the match quite rightly in that game, and
mm,
that sort of thing. It just shows, like, it was impressive the way they've adjusted. They lose Dan James, they lose Manuel Solomon, and it hasn't really affected them that much. So, you have to give all credit to them, really.
yeah, I agree. Sheffield United, Angus, really good defensive records. Like I said, Luton played them a couple of weeks ago, but Luton got was a bit of a mess. If I'm being honest, we never really tested them. Um, I don't know. I'm not sure that front four is working though. You, I know they didn't play it the other day. They've obviously a lot of the season have sort of played Haim on the left. I know the fans aren't overly pleased with O'Hare, like his contribution, like goals and assists. Um, so I'm not sure the balance doesn't seem correct. I've had m- more for weeks and he's not done anything really. So um, I'm happy with Burrows. Um, I would be happy for Hamer, but they've got run into a couple of tricky fixtures, so I might sell and come back. Um, yeah, Moore's going to go. If I had O'Hare, I think he would go as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of had questions about their attack for a little while now. Haven't really been putting up the attacking numbers, like the underlying numbers don't really sort of make it look any better. Um, and Yeah, I think it's been a real problem. They've scored, I think it's 12 goals this season. And I think it's something like five of those came in the first three games. So in terms of seeing what they've done recently, you particularly you take out the 2-0 against Luton, which obviously happened, but otherwise, since that international break in September that I've used for other teams, they came back and beat Hull 2-0, but only 1-0 against Derby, 0-0 against Portsmouth, which, bear in mind, at that point everyone was battering Portsmouth, and it was 0-0. 1-0 against Swansea, obviously 2-0 against Luton, and then this where they didn't feel like they carried much of a threat, really. Like, I know they're still sort of trying to work it out, and they've missed the odd player here and there, and the squad isn't the deepest and that sort of thing. But I think that there's been a little bit of the attack sort of flattering to deceive a little bit. I think defensively, absolutely, not a problem. Attack, yeah, it's still a little bit of a question mark for me. And I think fantasy wise, I only have Palmer. I I'd probably be happier if I had a defender from them. But I think he'll probably go in the short term. Little bit of a question mark about his calf. I think he just came off with calf tightness on Friday, but you think the quick turnaround, he could easily miss a game, but also, like you say, I think there's just a couple of tougher games you sort of jump off and then potentially sort of come back to him. Um, he's one that's still sort of perfectly fine if people want to hold. I think that's absolutely fine, and some people will have sort of bigger issues than him. And you look, sort of Stoke, Blackburn, Bristol City, not necessarily the scariest games. So I understand anyone who wants to hold, but yeah, it's just a little bit. I think if you've got sort of Cooper, Burrows, you're happy enough. It's just those attacking players where there's probably a little bit of a question mark at the moment.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
yeah, so I'll get on to what I really want to talk about, which is Cardiff 5, Plymouth nil. Um, Also, I'll start off by saying I will dive into the game. I'll start off by saying I really enjoy the fact that obviously they were against 10 men, but the Cardiff at no point sat on this lead. They kept going. They kept attacking. It would have been really easy to sort of just be like, oh, we're just going to sort of knock it around. They kept trying to score goals, and I enjoyed that. Um, even after Rubin Colwill went off, and I was sort of like, well, who cares? I might have turned it over to one of the other lunchtime kickoffs, but the fact that they kept trying to attack and trying to score meant that it stayed on for me. It was an enjoyable game. But yeah, they won 5-0. They started off with an Alex Robertson really good finish from a little pullback from Col-Will, first time sweeping it into the far corner. Um, Col-Will himself then made it 2-0. You messaged me sort of about the finish, and I said, yeah, it's also the touch before the finish to get it out of
Yeah.
his feet, make sure he has the space for that finish. Thought it was really good. Um, you then have the moment of madness from Ibrahim Sissoko. For those who haven't seen it, um, he gets fouled. And Perry and G just like smacks the ball at him while he's on the ground. He gets up and not with a lot of force. He puts two hands up to Perry and G's throat. Perry and G hits the deck, and it looks like Sissoko realizes just too late what he's done because he doesn't sort of push him over or anything. Like Perry and G just goes down, but that's the red card, and I don't think you can argue with it. Really, it's sort of like you get sent off for that.
Well,
Um,
you're not getting it overturned. Let's put it
no,
that way.
no, definitely not. Um, After half time, they came back out. El Ghazi made it 3-0. Tap in from a couple of yards out. Rubin Colwill finding him after being sort of slid in the right hand channel of the penalty area. They were playing some really nice stuff, aren't they? Um, Callum Robinson made it 4-0 with a very nice finish. And then Chris Willock, little bit of a miss hit, but volleyed it into the ground and it looped into the far corner. And I was just really impressed with them. I thought midfield two both found the right balance. Obviously, they dominate. You have to factor in they played half this game against 10 men, but the right balance between supporting the attack and maintaining that control in midfield. Three, the attacking four in terms of Tanner, Col-Will, and El Ghazi behind Robinson were a threat all game, moving really well, linking up really well. I think obviously the headline from this game, particularly from my point of view, is Col-Will, who knitted it all together well. But it's just it was a really sort of entertaining performance, which I know for a fact we wouldn't have got under Errol Bullock. Um, but just wanted to talk a little bit about sort of what they've done under the interim manager. And I saw in the week that Callum Robinson actually advocated for him keeping the job, which a performance like this will have done no harm. I think Callum Robinson was one of the players we know didn't get along with Bullock. Um, but they've had 4 games under the new manager, 2 wins, a draw, and a loss. Which when you think they're on about like 9, 10 points, that's the majority of their points this season have come in these 3 games. They're on 8 points, so 7 out of their 8 points this season have come in these 4 games. They've scored in every game. Um, that They seem to have settled on that front four of Tanner, Col-Will, and El Ghazi behind Robinson. Col-Will, I sort of mentioned, has started every one of those games. They had in the 3 games before he took over. They hadn't had a single big chance in the 3 games previous combined. Um, they've they've had I think at least one in every game. I think they've had one in 2 games, two in one, and three in another. Um, the first game was obviously sort of the negative one for them, where they lost. I think it was 4-1 to Hull. But you saw the shots tick up. Um, they've had at least 10 shots in every game. Um, it was 16 in that game. They had over 1.5 xg. Um, they but it was a little bit okay. There's only so positive you want to feel after a 4-1 defeat. turned around, beat Millwall. You know, the 10 shots in that game, two big chances. Um, got away with a 1-0 win. I think a couple of the stats would say they were a little bit fortunate there. 1-1 draw away at Bristol City. They did have the better XG. The shots were even, 15 for them, and they had three big chances. And then this game, it's a bit distorted. I don't want to weigh too much in on the stats where they had sort of 2.5 XG, 25 shots. But it just there are indications there that things are more positive. They have the personnel to potentially take advantage of some of that. Um, and they seem to be getting out on the pitch a bit more. Like Col-Will was obviously in and out of the team a little bit earlier in the season. El Ghazi is up to fitness now, which I think makes a big difference. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was really enjoyable to watch them, and I do think that they're sort of on a little bit of an upswing now. Portsmouth at home in midweek is another sort of opportunity for them. They obviously then have a tough run with West Brom away, Norwich at home, Luton away. I just want to potentially bear in mind, even either if you're looking for sort of a 1 week punt or sort of keep an eye on how they're doing, keep an eye on what they do with the managerial situation, because it seems if this guy does keep the job, that Cardiff options could be on the table. Sort of looking a bit further down the line. Um, just briefly on Plymouth, I thought they were okay. Prior to the red card, they had the first sort of real chance of the game with Obafemi rolling wide.
Yeah,
The red card completely distorted the game. Like obviously, it's negative in terms of how much they collapsed. Um, I think the pressure was relentless, which didn't help them. Which, like I say, is partially credit Cardiff, and they just struggled to get a foothold in the game at any point. But just really a game to forget for them. Really, I'm not sure I have a great deal more to say on them, but yeah, I don't know sort of if you have anything you want to sort of particularly say about these two.
I just wanted to talk not so much. You covered it pretty much well, but the front four, it's just a lot more exciting, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just is. You got Tanner, who's obviously came from non-league, was very highly rated. Um, Previously, you wouldn't have had four attacking players playing. You'd have only have had three. Um, like Robinson on his days is a good striker if you can get him chances. We've mentioned numerous times Col-Will just needed a run of games. Um, and I'm not sure he's good at the defensive stuff. So he's not going to fit in a bullet side because he doesn't want to do the defensive stuff. He wants to create. He wants to score goals. And El Ghazi's probably he's a good winger at this level. I think if you can keep him fit. So yeah, just a, just more entertaining front four. And the goalie. Um, Luton had Horvath, and although we kept 20 clean sheets, he's um, he's a bit of a disaster. He he makes so many big mistakes. So getting all week in goal is probably a sensible idea. And he must be 4 or 5, is he?
I believe so. Let me quickly check. Um,
That might be a. Obviously, you said they got a
yeah, he
few
is four
tricky
five.
games. Yeah, that's not terrible. I don't think.
Which again, like I said, I do know that there are people around who will be looking at something like Jeepers Keepers.
Well, yeah, I
Um,
am. Yeah,
and like I mentioned, they do have those tough games coming up, and one pattern across their games is they are having shots, they are also conceding shots.
yeah.
So there is potential there, with them playing the likes of West Brom, Norwich, and Luton in three of the next four. Where in that sort of window, in that boost window, I think it does put Anik on the table as an option. Um, but yeah, and one more mention for the fact that Rubin Colwill got 20 points this week.
Great pick. I was like, what on earth are you doing picking the card? I thought I'd missed something.
And
But
and
yeah,
I,
this is
and
just
I
one
then
of your
saw after
points.
I'd done it that Jamie had bought him
Yeah,
in as
Jamie had done it as
well.
well. I thought I'd missed something. I thought he turned, well, he has. He's obviously
Yeah.
turned into one of the best players in the league. But yeah,
But yeah, so that was actually, doubly entertaining because I enjoyed watching Cardiff anyway, but the fact it was my player involved in the first three goals just made it even better. Um, so yeah, so that's the Cardiff Plymouth game. What's the second game that you want to talk about? I think you'll enjoy this as much as I
I'm going
enjoy
to
talking about
enjoy this
Col-Will.
one as well. Yeah, I've not had much to be happy about with Luton this year. Um, but this was a lot better. Um, it was back to basics. Um, that Sheffield United game before the end of the last international, well, before the international, was really bad. He was playing players out of position. We tried to play 4-5-1, and our team is just built to play 3-5-2. Like it
Yeah,
doesn't need complicating. We got Adebayo and Morris, two of the best strikers in the league. You got Jacob Brown, who can come off the bench or start. It's not a massive drop off. I would say we've got a lot of centre backs. They're all out injured now again, but we've got loads of centre mid options. Um, we got Doughty, probably the best wing back in the league. Um, so playing there, yeah, we just went back to basics. We weren't mucking around at the back. We got it forward into our strikers, played in their half, and they couldn't really handle us. Um, we were a threat from pieces. Two of the goals came from set pieces. The first one, Doughty into Holmes, who shot and it hit Clark and went in. And then another Doughty corner, back stick Morris there. You can't leave him free. And it was nice to see his smile. So, yeah, so, and then Brown rounded it off from the Kaminsky long ball. So it was just a lot better performance. I hope we stick with that. Like I know he wanted to evolve the team, but it just wasn't working. Um, we just need to make it like that. And if we go back to playing this formation, we're going to climb the table pretty quickly from the opponents I've seen. Um, I, we discussed and in the pod team we did bench Doughty, and I know people have sold him, um, but this is what Doughty does. Like he gets it if, and he even got booked as well.
yeah,
So he got an assist, and he just goes automatically to full bonus. And this is in a 3-0 win as well. This isn't like a 1-0 win. Um, and this is why he's he was the most expensive defender in the game. Um, yeah, I'm not getting rid of him now. He might be playing centre back though at the week against Sunderland, which will be interesting. But yeah, I'm not getting rid of him. I know we've got a tricky run of fixtures. We've got Sunderland, West Brom, Cardiff, Coventry in the next five. It's not in that order, I don't think. Um, but yeah, if we start getting some results, and then players like Morris are going to be back on the table pretty quickly. For Watford, I thought Chetfatadze was a threat. Um, we know that anyway. But they just didn't really turn up. Um, that's just not bragging. You could just tell it's been quite the last few years. We've won all our home games and they've won all theirs. So when we played them, but yeah, he Tepatadze's the main one. I'm not sure I'd go anywhere else. Bayo only had one pass in the whole 50 odd minutes he was in in the game. But yeah, I don't know if you managed to watch the game, but I guess you probably didn't. You're counting your Col-Will points, weren't you?
Yeah, so I didn't manage to watch much of this game. So actually alternating, I think, between points between the Cardiff game and Oxford West Brom, which I'm sure we'll cover at points, but did see that it was going well for you. I do think, I will confess, I was debating selling Doughty this
I think
week.
everyone's, and I can
Um,
understand why.
yeah, and I just ultimately I decided that this wasn't the week for it, and thankfully I've been proven right. I don't think I will be now. I wouldn't rule it out completely, in part because I think
Mm.
this was a good game, but um, yeah, it's changed a little bit, and I do think it's different. If I know there's centre back issues, but if you're actually going to play 3-5-2, that I know when we've been talking about it, we've sort of been consistently saying just play
It's
three
still
five
obvious.
two.
Yeah,
Um, particularly getting Morris up top with Adebayo, not playing off him.
he
Like,
has been injured though. And obviously, Brown's coming back from his long term, so I know it's not been easy,
mm,
but it's so obvious.
yeah,
The two of the best strikers in the league. They cause havoc in the Premier League. It was the main reason why we got promoted. Is if we play like this, we're going to climb the table. So it's like so obvious. I remember when I sent you the lineup of the Sheffield United game, and you were like, "What on earth is that?"
yeah. I think I might have used the word nonsense about it, but
It was. It was like you had a right back playing left back, or centre back playing right back. Doughty was playing right wing, and Victor Moses was playing. It was like, what on earth is he doing?
but yeah,
Yeah,
this even just watching it back, this felt much more familiar. Like you say, it really
yeah.
did just feel okay. I've seen this before. I know what this looks like.
It was also good to see Chong sort of play as a number eight
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I wasn't sure if that would work in the system, but I'm not saying like when we go away to Leeds he can play in there. We might, but he does make he's a bit frustrating. I know he doesn't always have that much end product, but his ability to just win free kicks, travel with the ball is massive, especially in the three-man mid. So yeah, it's a better performance, but tricky game at home to Sunderland with at the minute maybe only one fit centre back. So could be interesting.
yeah. It's not exactly what you want at that point, but the fact that you feel just even that you will feel more positive about that is is a big deal. Sort of you want positive, you want to start building positive momentum, really. Um,
I did want to mention Watford just the difference between their home form and their away form is pretty drastic. Um, at home they they've picked up 13 out of 15 points. They've had some good results. I think they beat Middlesbrough there, Sunderland there. So at home, it's obviously working for Cleverley, but away from home, they only have 3 points. And I think that was that crazy game on the opening day against Millwall, where I think they scored from a corner and Jensen made a couple of
mhm.
mistakes. If I'm not much, so I think they've got Leeds away. So having seen them, I think a Leeds player might be getting the captain armband this week.
Yeah, for that context, obviously on some of these sites you can sort by home and away. If you sort by sort of home form this season, Watford are third. Sort by
Yeah,
away form this season, Watford are 18th.
yeah.
So
So there's obviously their setup's not. I don't think it's really working away. Whereas at home, it's
yeah.
obviously going well.
Also, one final note on this game. I know you pointed out that Bayo's only completed pass was the kickoff after the first goal. I want to know why they decided that he didn't take the kickoff after the second goal because he was still on the pitch, but they changed kickoff takers. So, um,
I don't know if they hit it long to him. I can't remember.
Yeah, but like
I was still recovering from the second goal.
yeah, but just pointing out, like clearly they didn't like the way he took the first kick off or something. Like they needed to change it. But yeah, a day to forget for Watford. Um, in terms of the other games, just sort of sitting on little bits and pieces. Um, Mentioned Oxford and West Brom. Obviously, double clean sheet wipeout for me in the end. Carl and Grant with the opener. Dane Scarlett with the added time goal. Have to admit, I'd forgotten Dane Scarlett uh, had gone to Oxford. Um,
Well, he's one of them where I've said it about a few players, and I'm not going to say anymore because they seem to turn out quite well. But he's had a few loan spells that haven't really worked out. So he's one of these who is highly rated, but hasn't quite found the club. And he's obviously playing second fiddle to Harris. But it was a decent header, to be fair.
yeah, I will say this was going to be goal of the week in this game, just for that proper football element. Long throw, near post flick on. Uh, and then header from sort of center of the goal into the corner. Unfortunately, it was picked, and I will sort of just jump to that quickly before we talk about the other game. He was robbed by Wilson Isidore's goal today against Hull. Just the sort of just the finish. I love that the sort of calmness and execution of the finish. He nicked goal of the week off Dane Scarlett's proper football goal, um, in what was obviously sort of a big result for them. But yeah, disappointing one for West Brom, particularly because it would have been another clean sheet as well, which they've obviously then lost late on. But blow for a lot of people who have at least one sort of West Brom defence. Some like me have two, but not necessarily cause for concern for them. Just more a little bit of a frustration. I think Corberan talked about them having to sort of maintain that focus and control all the way through the game. I think I think he was sort of saying there's been a couple of times they've conceded a late goal in a game, and I think it's something that he's going to be sort of drumming back into them. I think we're reaching a point where some people will probably be starting to look to come off their West Brom players anyway. Particularly as we get to sort of game week 13, where they go to Luton, play Burnley, go to Hull, play Norwich, go to Sunderland. I think
Yeah,
that's
it's tricky one.
um, so I think that will start to change, but yeah, just another we were talking before we started about Oxford as well. It's another point on the board for them. A bit, you know, keep being impressed by them. They keep finding a way to pick up points as well. All credit to them.
I said to you, we played them midweek before the international break, and we were two up. They're a good side. That um, from what I've seen, they're going to be comfortable. Although get a few injuries, they could slip down. And
Mind
the
you,
way it's
they
going,
played a decent chunk of the season without Brannigan, who we thought was going to be absolutely
yeah,
pivotal to them, and they've still managed to pick up some
yeah,
results. So
that is true. Yeah. From what I've seen there, and I know it's early. I think I think they're going to stay up. I think.
yeah, if they keep sort of playing like this, I think they'll pick up enough points. Certainly. Um, any other games in particular you wanted to mention?
Not really. I suppose there's been a lot of talk about Burnley's attacking numbers. They created 1.71 xG. I'm not, they conceded 1.5. Like they've been a massive outlier in the data, but I know what Angus is going to say. It's just Scott Parker, but
Scott Parker. It does feel a little bit fraudulent, but Fleming came in, played up top, with Foster being out. I have Josh Brownhill, quite
yeah,
happy
that's,
owning
that's
Josh
just me a
Brownhill.
little bit. Yeah, that's gone quite well the last few weeks.
Yeah. Where I had the debate, I think it was Brownhill or Kolyosho, and I think Brownhill's returned in all three or two of the three, I think, since I bought him, and so it's been quite nice with him. Perez obviously left out this game. I'm not too worried about that, although it was a bit weird.
Yeah,
Um,
very weird.
so it'd be interesting to see sort of in midweek, hoping he goes straight back in the lineup. Um, Also, I'm not going to do this as a segment every week, but celebration of the week. Josh Brownhill, Josh Laurent, and Josh Cullen doing the Spider-Man meme at each other after Josh Brownhill scored. I assume that's because they're all called Josh, but
Gosh,
I
yeah,
I enjoyed it. um, and I guess a mention for you know the other game that I was going to mention. A mention for Portsmouth getting their first win
yeah,
of the
they got the
season.
wins. Yeah,
Callum Lang back into the lineup and he assists a goal and scores the winning penalty. Talked about him and then he got injured, but he's clearly important for them. But just vital for them to get that win on the board. They have to start picking up points now. We talked about their horrible start. This is the period where they need to be picking up points now, and I think just sort of a big deal for them getting that first win on the board as well.
yeah. Interesting set of fixtures this weekend. It's the bottom four all play each other. So you got Cardiff, Portsmouth, QPR, Coventry. So yeah, it's some
Are
fan
they
bases.
both Tuesday?
I think so. I hope they are because Luton play on Wednesday, so I'd like to at least see them.
Um,
Yeah, I think they are. Yeah, they are. Yeah.
yeah, whereas I'm going to be at the football on Tuesday, so I was hoping
Um,
one of them was at the Wednesday.
you know how much I like a relegation battle.
Oh, I definitely would have talked myself, not just because of Rubin Colwill, into watching Cardiff Portsmouth on one screen on Tuesday. It probably would have been sort of Cardiff Portsmouth on one screen and Leeds Watford on the other. But yeah, disappointed to be missing that. But yeah, Portsmouth getting on the board, and obviously problems, concerns for QPR at this point as well.
Yeah. I mean, their only wins come against Luton.
It's really funny how things work like that. So yeah, so that's sort of most of the games. I mean, obviously, there was or the one final one I will sort of mention after what would have been a sort of very difficult week for them. Bristol City getting the win against
Yeah.
Middlesbrough. Can't imagine how tough this week has been for them and for sort of Liam Manning and that sort of thing. And you know, obviously, it's sort of like it doesn't totally sort of help, but just sort of at the end of that to come away with a result in a tough game, sort of you know a big deal for them. And I'm not sure anyone would have felt particularly negative about them getting a win this week. Um,
Before we go on to the questions, Angus, it's getting to that season where players are starting to get their fifth yellow cards.
yeah, we had the first two this weekend.
Well, there's three. I don't know if one managed it before the
So so
international.
so Vinny Souza got booked on Friday, so he will miss midweek. But Ben Whiteman and Mark Sykes were suspended this weekend, the
Oh,
first
okay.
two to manage it.
Yeah, but I was looking through the list of people on four
Yeah,
players. I'm
yeah,
going to read off some fantasy relevant names:
yeah.
Gus Hamer, Jaden Bogle, Furpo, Doughty, uh, Trey Hume, Armour Hodvich, and I think that might be it. Tyrese Dolan, Perry Ng, Lyle Foster. So yeah, there's a lot of players who are going to get suspended soon. So yeah, keep an eye out for it. Um, as someone who might be bringing in Bogle or Furpo, I'll let you know who I bring in because that'll be the one that will get booked, and you guys bring in the other one.
And just to fill in the gaps for, just to assume that there might be some weirdo out there with the other players on this list, I'll fill in the gaps that Dan left about probably the less fantasy relevant players. Andrew Hughes, Ben Wilmot, CJ Egan Riley, Hayden Carter. Actually, Egan Riley might be relevant because he's played a few games for Burnley now, and I wonder if anyone sort of looked at him as a cheap way into that team.
Yeah,
Joe Edwards at Plymouth, Joe Williams, Jordan Clark, uh, Joe Roden, Josh Eccles, Josh Tyman, Lewis Travis, Marcelino Nunez, Peter Kioso, Ryan Porteous, Semi Ajayi. So potentially a few in there who might be sitting in teams, the likes of even someone like Ajayi, for those with the extra West
true.
Brom
Yeah,
coverage. But yeah, so potential problems down the line. Or, it might be one of those where they sit on four yellows for like 6 weeks and it's
yeah.
not a problem. Um, but yeah, so that's the four yellows. And yeah, like you say, particularly as we had the first two to miss out this weekend, I think it is that time to sort of just highlight it. With Vinny Souza also missing in midweek, which is something to bear in mind when you're thinking about Sheffield United. Um,
Yeah, he's very, very good. Good player,
so
seems.
yeah, so the one thing left is the questions. We've had 5 people ask us questions, so thank you to those of you who've asked. First question is from Chris Hermitage, who's asked best striker to replace Foster with. He has Madger and Sargent already.
Yeah, it's tricky. I've got those two. I've got more. He's likely to be going soon. Um, it's, it's tricky, isn't it? Um, we will get the Leeds line
Yeah,
up, so
I was going to say whoever's
it's
starting up front
Bones,
for Leeds, particularly if it's
Piera.
Joel Piru again, because three in a
Um,
row that suggests he's got the spot. But um,
yeah, it's not been any outstanding ones. Like Luton are in a tricky run. Um, Burnley, obviously, Foster's been terrible, and he's out. Um,
yeah, I guess maybe the other one would be someone like Tom Cannon.
yeah, they've already played Portsmouth though.
Yeah, but Bristol City at home
Decent,
and
yeah.
Bristol City away have, aside from this weekend, have and even then they conceded a lot of chances to Borough. Sort of Sheffield United away is obviously bad, but then Derby home, Blackburn away. It's not the worst set of games in there. I'd also, I mean, I know it's not the best game this week. I'd potentially look at Isidore at Sunderland.
I mean, I'm not sure it should be a red fixture considering we don't have any centre backs.
Yeah,
So yeah,
but
I agree. That's not terrible. Is Maeda out for a while then?
I think he's not that far away. But I think Isidore seems to just be the first choice. I think he was brought in with the intention of playing relatively late in the transfer window. So and he's certainly looked good. So I think you have to assume he's going to be the first choice there.
Mm. Yeah, it's tricky. No strikers are really standing out, are they?
No,
Apart from Madger and Sargent. So I wonder if like it's a move to 3-5-2.
yeah, I mean that's the other option. You just sort of potentially you sort of downgrade it right down. Um,
Maybe not right down there. There's quite a few options, six and under, isn't there?
yeah,
It's
I was thinking right down in terms of to sort of 5.5 ish area, just sort of like someone down in that region that you can maybe chuck in for the odd game. Someone like a Callum Lang. Um,
yeah. Harris 5'8".
yeah. Um, Callum Robinson is 6. Um, Cardiff don't have the best run after this week, but if you're looking at this week and then assessing week by week, you could do
Yeah.
much worse than that. Um, Along these lines, non-stop FPL has asked, keep Joseph with Leeds decent fixtures, or is he a rotation risk? Well, I think we can have to say he's a rotation risk at this point, given that Piru started the last two. He does feature pretty much every game off the bench, and that's the one thing, particularly, you know. to bear in mind that and he has returned off the bench this week. Um, if he doesn't start in midweek, I would probably look to sell just because that's been 3 games in a row he hasn't started. Um, even though he is featuring off the bench, it also depends what other issues you've got. But I guess Joseph is cheaper, but he's not exactly cheap in terms of you could probably make a bit of saving if you're going to have a striker who's not playing. Um, don't know what your thoughts are on Joseph, Dan.
Yeah, to be honest, just wait to see the lineup.
Yeah,
If he's playing, you're going to play him against Watford, I think. And if he's not, he's an easy player to get rid of. I think.
yeah, definitely. Um, James Wood, and I have to admit, I haven't necessarily done the research on this, but based on XA and XG, who are the three most under the radar assets in both midfield and attack? He's asked the second question, but
Well, if
just
you're on about who's missed a lot of chances and doing well on the data, it has to be Adebayo. Must be out there.
I
I
think yeah,
wouldn't go.
Adebayo's high. So
Yeah,
he's seventh in the league for XG. A mention for talked about Callum Lang. He's sixth in the league for XG. I've mentioned him a couple of times. So someone like that is under the radar. Latte
he's
Lath
on
is
the radar.
fourth in the league for XG, despite only scoring 1 goal. Um, but yeah, I think particularly in terms of XG, you're talking about the likes of, I mean, because at the top it's Madger, it's Sargent, it's Saints, then it's Latte Lath, Bedia from Hull, Lang, Adebayo, Moore, Bright, Manhoof. Um, so yeah, I'd point to maybe Bedia because I think Hull with a little bit more attacking, but you know, Lang and potentially Adebayo, but Lang would be probably the main under the radar one for me.
I can't say Adebayo over Morris. I can't say it at the minute.
Um, XA comfortably the leader in the league is Alfie Doughty, followed by Fellows and Jack Fatazzo, who've talked about Barry Ban, Scott Twine. We've talked about Scott Twine. I sold him this week, but Scott Twine is under the radar and he does sort of create chances. He does feature in the bonus as a result. Also in the top 10, Jaden Bogle. I mean, we've talked a lot about Jaden Bogle, but just sort of in terms of there is a bit of an attacking sort of bit there. Um, but I guess maybe it'd be Barry Bannon, given that he's fourth in the league for XA, and I'm not sure anyone owns Barry Bannon.
He's still a good player. Scored a great
Um,
goal
yeah,
against Leeds a couple of
yeah.
weeks ago.
And the second question from James said, "What ideas could you come up with for a new boost in game week 16?" He said an unlimited budget free hit could be fun and help people catch up a lot of points really quickly if they get it right. Um, yeah, the limitless. I guess it's the same concept as the limitless in Champions League fantasy for those who play
Yeah,
it. Something like that is always something that, in theory, you could sort of say, yeah, open it up. Although I think for a lot of people this season they're struggling to spend the budget. Um, they're struggling to spend the budget as it is. So do they need the extra budget for a free hit like that? But yeah, something like that could certainly be fun. Just trying to think. I'm not sure if there's anything that sort of that you
it's
can
hard.
imagine.
They've done so many good ones.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think something like that. Sure, in terms of limitless. Um, but yeah, it's tough to imagine too much more. Maybe if they could do something where um, people get boosted in a red fixture or something like that. But particularly as difficulty shifts as we get into the season, and some people we thought were difficult aren't, and things like that, maybe that would become a little bit sort of trickier to do. But yeah, I think we've seen so many different ones that provide a lot of sort of interest. It's difficult to come up with too many more, to be honest. Um, Jaskaran Singh has asked us, Three favourite picks each in defence, midfield, and up front. Um, so I think defence. I'm gonna say Firpo slash Bogle. I wouldn't necessarily want both of them, but Firpo slash Bogle. I'd probably still say Harrison Burrows. Um, and I mean, I'll just say Doughty just because I think he showed this weekend what he's capable of. But I think if that run sort of wasn't staring at me now, I'd probably say Perez as the other one. But
Yeah, I think Sunderland defenders are going
yeah,
under the radar.
yeah,
I did have um Sirkin for a couple of weeks, and then I overhauled set up away days. He's he's 5'7", but another clean sheet today. Keeps ticking on the points. So I do think Sunderland defenders have been under the radar, and it
um,
is pretty solid. That back four's pretty settled now. With even Mepham's a good solid centre back.
yeah.
Um,
So I think definitely that is the other sort of midfield. Who would your top three picks be in midfield at the moment?
Signs. Um, I think you need to go a Leeds mid.
Yeah,
Um, and I think someone like I think Brownhill's going really under. I know you probably don't want too many people investing in him, but their games are pretty tight. And if he does anything, he's going to get good bonus as well. He's 7-1. I don't hate that. Um, you're probably going to say Col-Will, when you're Angus.
yeah. I mean, I'm gonna have to. Although, in all seriousness, I probably wouldn't advise people to buy him beyond this midweek. Um, right now, but I think yeah, Saints. Um, I'm gonna say Nonto, but it is sort of Nonto slash Ramazani for me. Um, and I mean, I would say Cole, but I'm gonna throw out Manhoof from Stoke. He scored at the weekend, and I think they've got an all right looking run of games, as I mentioned before with Cannon. So I think he's really one to potentially look at. And as you say, Brownhill, just that solidity. And forwards. I mean, we're gonna say Madger and Sargent, so it's almost just picking a
Yeah,
third
but
in there.
even then, Madges, he's slowed up a bit, isn't he?
Yes.
So
Um,
I think it's Sergeant's why. Um, yes, if Pirro gets a run in, he's going to score goals
yeah,
and assists. I think. Um, I'm gonna say Carlton Morris. I think if Carlton Morris is fit, he just scores. He'll just score goals, even in some of these tricky games.
yeah. No, I think that's fair. I do sort of agree with that. The other one that I'm going to throw in because I keep mentioning him, so I might as well throw it in one more time is Callum Lang.
Yeah,
Um, he's also asked, is Brownhill the clear go-to pick in attack from Burnley? I've been avoiding him due to underlying stats, but keeps racking up points. Um, I think that's the story of it. A lot of people who look at the data and that sort of thing won't be going with Josh Brownhill, but he keeps getting the returns, he keeps getting the points, and I think it is that solidity. He finds his way into the bonus reliably. He because they have had their issues. Someone like him keeps ticking over very nicely. Um, you know, Kolyosho is the sort of most exciting one, but he's sort of there. There's a lot of blanks in there. Um, so I'd probably say Brownhill is the better option at this point. Um, although I do think Jaden Anthony is interesting.
I'm not sure. it's so hard because they've been so poor
Yeah,
attacking. Like I had Foster, but he done nothing for weeks. He had probably had the three easiest or really good fixtures for like an attacker against defences, and he just didn't do anything. So I think I'd rather go double defence on Burnley.
yeah. I'm not going to advise people to go with Fleming because I went with Fleming and it burned me badly. Also, word of the wise for those who do have Fleming, I'm doing you a nice little favour here. He is technically on loan from Millwall, so he can't play in game week 13. So there's your little helpful tip there. And he's also asked, will there be a player availability update for game week 11? So I assume that's the team news sort of threads I do. The answer to that, simply put, is no. In part because a lot of teams don't do presses between sort of Saturday games and particularly Tuesday games. Beyond the fact that I'll be busy enough with work, particularly on Tuesday, that I wouldn't be able to do it. But just in these short turnarounds, it's not really worth it. I've tried when I've done this weekend's team news to give some indications around players who might miss out or might be back. So if you do look at the sheet, there are some hints there with some of the players who might be back or who won't be back till the weekend. I've tried to give indications where they've been, but there won't be anything. So there won't be a thread this week, no, on or this midweek, no, on
I'm
availability.
guessing the main player to one of them is Hamer, so it might be easier to just search out one player in for yourselves, like
Yeah,
Hamer's.
yeah. I mean, like Wilder will sort of talk about that in some form or fashion. Um, and uh, Adam, Bluebird Adam has said, which game week will Cardiff first enter the playoff spots?
I'm going to go 46.
I love that. Let me look. I want to look at the Cardiff fixtures. I want to pick like a funny point for them to enter the playoffs.
I was going to be mean and say like game week 1, but it's a bit harsh.
um, so can't be bothered to work out which game week it is. Um, I'm now actually trying to look ahead to work out which game week it is. But I'm already sort of losing interest. So game week 27, after they beat Swansea at home, they're going to go into the playoffs. Um, but yeah, so that is all the questions. Thank you to everyone who sent one in. Um, Thank you to Jaskaran as well for preempting one of my points at the end of this, which is that there won't be a team news thread in midweek. I'll try and do one ahead of the weekend's games, just because that you have more reliability on managers actually doing presses at that point. But there'll be little bits and pieces flying about. If I manage to catch something, I'll sort of flag it. But I'm not planning to do any sort of update ahead of midweek. We will be back next weekend. Again, I think it's one of those things in terms of between the midweek game week and the weekend game week. It's just too short of a turnaround to do anything. So we'll be back next weekend, but we'll have twice as many games to review. So that'll keep things interesting. Um, and yeah, we will speak to you next time. Thank you for listening and goodbye.
Goodbye.